Hello, everyone. Just getting settled in before we get started. Changed up the music this time. Supposedly, this is a lo-fi Christmas album. Hey, Vela. Glad you're here. Hope you like the music change. I'm seriously tempted to apply for like an ASCAP license so I can play some other stuff. It's just a little confusing which license I need and which would apply. They're also kind of pricey. Of course, their website claims they're very reasonable, but yeah, they're pricey. Not as much as I should have, to be honest. But I have tea and a good story in all of you, so we'll power through. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, it's obviously bedtime. And I'm getting fussed at for not making it my bedtime a few hours ago before the stream started. But that's alright. That's just Vela trying to take care of me, make sure I'm taking care of myself. We picked up another follower in between streams. So Dango893, thank you so much for the follow. Hopefully you're able to pop in here either for the recording or coming up in the stream. Love to hear what you think and how you found us. I hope you joined the Discord. Same with Halisha, who followed us a few days ago. The Discord link is there on the page right now, and Vela will probably be popping it up in the chat here in just a second since I brought it up. She's usually awesome about that. But join the Discord, have a chat with us. Let us know what you think of the stream, connect with other people in the community, chance to request books to be read and that sort of thing. Speaking of books being read, for those of you who are listening who are in the Discord already, if you check the feedback channel, I posed a question for everyone. I would like to know what you think of the idea of a format change. Up till now, we have been reading books once a week. So we read several different books, but each one we read on the same day each week. And what I'm contemplating is changing that up, and we read like one book at a time, but we read it every single stream until we finish it. That would let us get through books a lot faster, and I think it would be easier to keep up with the stories because you wouldn't be switching in between different ones. So I'd love to hear from you, hear what you think of it, whether you think that's a good idea or not. It is a relatively big change compared to the way we have been doing things. For those of you who can't make every stream, that's totally fine. Remember, there are recordings of each stream on both Twitch and YouTube, so you can listen at your leisure and keep up that way. So even if you happen to miss the live stream, there's still the recording to listen to. No worries, Vela. I appreciate everything you do. Absolutely, completely and totally. You have been an amazing support in doing this. I've got my tea too, and it's nice and warm and non-burny right now. So I even remembered that I should do my transition. So look at that. There we are. In any case, today we are reading Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie. When we left off, I had become greatly disappointed in Hastings. He had allowed the murder weapon to be stolen because he was taken in by a pretty face. and trying to impress a girl that is rather blatantly using him, and then had to account for it to the inspectors and magistrates and to his friend Perot. And after some chastisement and this reveal, he and Perot walked back to town, where Perot promised to give some sort of explanation of his thoughts on the case. And I know I promised poetry with each reading, but I think we'll do that at intermission today, if that's all right. And we'll read another poem then. But for today, we'll just dive right into the story. Okay. We are on chapter 12. Perot elucidates certain points. "Why did you measure that overcoat?" I asked, with some curiosity, as we walked down the hot white road at a leisurely pace. If you recall, one of the last things that Perot did when they left the hall was to measure the overcoat that presumably was worn by the young Mr. Jack Renault. "Parbleu, to see how long it was," replied my friend imperturbably. I was vexed. Perot's incurable habit of making a mystery out of nothing never failed to irritate me. I relapsed into silence and followed a train of thought of my own. Although I had not noticed them specially at the time, certain words Mrs. Renault had addressed to her son now recurred to me, fraught with a new significance. "So you did not sail," she had said, and then had added, "After all, it does not matter now." What had she meant by that? The words were enigmatical, significant. Was it possible that she knew more than we supposed? She denied all knowledge of the mysterious mission with which her husband was to have entrusted his son. But was she really less ignorant than she pretended? Could she enlighten us if she chose? And was her silence part of a carefully thought out and preconceived plan? The more I thought about it, the more I was convinced that I was right. Mrs. Renault knew more than she chose to tell. In her surprise at seeing her son, she had momentarily betrayed herself. I felt convinced that she knew, if not the assassins, at least the motive for the assassination. But some very powerful considerations must keep her silent. "You think profoundly, my friend," remarked Perot, breaking in upon my reflections. "What is it that intrigues you so?" I told him, sure of my ground, though feeling expectant that he would ridicule my suspicions. But to my surprise, he nodded thoughtfully. "You are quite right, Hastings. From the beginning, I have been sure that she was keeping something back. At first, I suspected her, if not inspiring, at least conniving at the crime." "You suspected her?" I cried. "But certainly. She benefits enormously. In fact, by this new will, she is the only person to benefit. So from the start, she was singled out for attention. You may have noticed that I took an early opportunity of examining her wrists. I wished to see whether there was any possibility that she had gagged and bound herself. Eh bien, I saw at once that there was no fake. The cords had actually been drawn so tight as to cut into the flesh. That ruled out the possibility of her having committed the crime single-handed. But it was still possible for her to have connived at it, or to have been the instigator with an accomplice. Moreover, the story, as she told it, was singularly familiar to me. The masked men that she could not recognize, the mention of the secret. I had heard or read all these things before. Another little detail confirmed my belief that she was not speaking the truth. The wristwatch, Hastings, the wristwatch. Again, that wristwatch. Perot was eyeing me curiously. "You see, mon ami, you comprehend?" "No," I replied, with some ill humor. "I neither see nor comprehend. You make all these confounded mysteries, and it's useless asking you to explain. You always like keeping everything up your sleeve to the last minute." "Do not enrage yourself, my friend," said Perot with a smile. "I will explain if you wish, but not a word to Gerard. C'est entendu?" He treats me as an old one of no importance. We shall see. In common fairness, I gave him a hint. If he does not choose to act upon it, that is his own lookout. I assured Perrault that he could rely upon my discretion. C'est bien. Let us employ our little grey cells. Tell me, my friend, at what time, according to you, did the tragedy take place? Why, at 2 o'clock or thereabouts, I said, astonished. You remember, Mrs. Renaud said that she heard the clock strike while the men were in the room. Exactly. And on the strength of that, you, the examining magistrate, backs everyone else, except the time, without further question. But I, Hercule Poirot, say that Madame Renaud lied. The crime took place at least 2 hours earlier. But the doctors, they declared after examination of the body that death had taken place between 10 and 7 hours previously. Mon ami, for some reason it was imperative that the crime should seem to have taken place later than it actually did. You have read of a smashed watch or clock recording the exact hour of a crime? So that the time should not rest on Mrs. Renaud's testimony alone. Someone moved on the hands of that wristwatch to 2 o'clock, and then dashed it violently to the ground. But, as is often the case, they defeated their own object. The glass was smashed, but the mechanism of the watch was uninjured. It was a most disastrous maneuver on their part, for it at once drew my attention to 2 points. First, that Madame Renaud was lying. Secondly, that there must be some vital reason for the postponement of the time. But what reason could there be? Ah, that is the question. There we have the whole mystery. As yet, I cannot explain it. There is only one idea that presents itself to me as having a possible connection. And that is, the last train left Merlinville at 17 minutes past 12. I followed it out slowly, so that the crime apparently taking place some 2 hours later, anyone leaving by that train would have an unimpeachable alibi. Perfect, Hastings. You have it. I sprang up. But we must inquire at the station. Surely they cannot have failed to notice 2 foreigners who left by that train. We must go there at once. You think so, Hastings? Of course. Let us go there now. Poirot restrained my ardor with a light touch upon the arm. Go by all means if you wish, mon ami. But if you go, I should not ask for particulars of 2 foreigners. I stared, and he said rather impatiently, Ah la, you do not believe all that rigmarole, do you? The masked men and all the rest of cette histoire-là? His words took me so much aback that I hardly knew how to respond. He went on serenely. You heard me say to Gerard, did you not, that all the details of this crime were familiar to me? Eh bien, that presupposes one of 2 things. Either the brain that planned the first crime also planned this one, or else an account read of a cause célèbre unconsciously remained in our assassin's memory and prompted the details. I shall be able to pronounce definitively on that after, he broke off. I was resolving sundry matters in my mind. But Mr. Renaud's letter, it distinctly mentions a secret in Santiago. Undoubtedly there was a secret in Monsieur Renaud's life. There can be no doubt of that. On the other hand, the word Santiago, to my mind, is a red herring dragged continually across the track to put us off the scent. It is possible that it was used in the same way on Monsieur Renaud, to keep him from directing his suspicions into a quarter nearer at hand. Oh, be assured, Hastings, the danger that threatened him was not in Santiago. It was near at hand, in France. He spoke so gravely, and with such assurance, that I could not fail to be convinced. But I essayed one final objection. And the match and cigarette end found near the body. What of them? A light of pure enjoyment lit up Poirot's face. Planted, deliberately planted there for Gerard or one of his tribe to find. Ah, he is smart, Gerard. He can do his tricks. So can a good retriever dog. He comes in so pleased with himself. For hours he has crawled on his stomach. See what I have found, he says. And then again to me, what do you see here? Me, I answer with profound and deep truth. Nothing. And Gerard, the great Gerard, he laughs. He thinks to himself, oh, that he is imbecile, this old one. But we shall see. My mind had reverted to the main facts. Then all this story of the masked men is false. What really happened? Perrault shrugged his shoulders. One person could tell us, Madame Renaud, but she will not speak. Threats and entreaties would not move her. A remarkable woman that, Hastings. I recognized as soon as I saw her that I had to deal with a woman of unusual character. At first, as I told you, I was inclined to suspect her of being concerned in the crime. Afterwards, I altered my opinion. What made you do that? Her spontaneous and genuine grief at the sight of her husband's body. I could swear that the agony in that cry of hers was genuine. Yes, I said thoughtfully, one cannot mistake these things. I beg your pardon, my friend. One can always be mistaken. Regard a great actress. Does not her acting of grief carry you away and impress you with its reality? No, however strong my own impression and belief, I needed other evidence before I allowed myself to be satisfied. The great criminal can be a great actor. I based my certainty in this case, not upon my own impression, but upon the undeniable fact that Mrs. Renaud actually fainted. I turned up her eyelids and felt her pulse. There was no deception. The swoon was genuine. Therefore, I was satisfied that her anguish was real and not assumed. Besides, a small additional point, not without interest. It was unnecessary for Mrs. Renaud to exhibit unrestrained grief. She had had one paroxysm on learning of her husband's death, and there would be no need for her to simulate another, such a violent one, on beholding his body. No, Mrs. Renaud was not her husband's murderess. But why has she lied? She lied about the wristwatch. She lied about the masked men. She lied about a third thing. Tell me, Hastings, what is your explanation of the open door? Well, I said, rather embarrassed, I suppose it was an oversight. They forgot to shut it. Perrault shook his head and sighed. That is the explanation of Gerard. It does not satisfy me. There's a meaning behind that open door, which for a moment I cannot fathom. I have an idea, I cried suddenly. Ah, la bonne heure, let us hear it. Listen, we are agreed that Mrs. Renaud's story is a fabrication. Is it not possible, then, that Monsieur Renaud left the house to keep an appointment, possibly with the murderer, leaving the front door open for his return? But he did not return, and the next morning he is found stabbed in the back. An admirable theory, Hastings, but for two facts which you have characteristically overlooked. In the first place, who gagged and bound Madame Renaud? And why on earth should they return to the house to do so? In the second place, no man on earth would go out to keep an appointment wearing his underclothes and an overcoat. There are circumstances in which a man might wear pajamas and an overcoat, but the other, never. True, I said, rather crestfallen. No, continued Perrault. We must look elsewhere for a solution of the open door mystery. One thing I am fairly sure of. They did not leave through the door. They left by the window. What? Precisely. But there were no footmarks in the flower bed underneath. No, and there ought to have been. Listen, Hastings. The gardener, Augusta, as you heard him say, planted both those beds the preceding afternoon. In the one, there are plentiful impressions of his big hobnailed boots. In the other, none. You see, someone had passed that way, someone who, to obliterate their footprints, smoothed over the surface of the bed with a rake. Where did they get a rake? Where they got the spade and the gardening glove, said Perrault impatiently. There is no difficulty about that. What makes you think that they left that way, though? Surely it is more probable that they entered by the window and left by the door. That is possible, of course. Yet I have a strong idea that they left by the window. I think you are wrong. Perhaps, mon ami. I mused, thinking over the new field of conjecture that Perrault's deductions had opened up to me. I recalled my wonder at his cryptic allusions to the flower bed and the wristwatch. His remarks had seemed so meaningless at the moment, and now, for the first time, I realized how remarkably, from a few slight incidents, he had unraveled much of the mystery that surrounded the case. I paid a belated homage to my friend. As though he read my thoughts, he nodded sagely. Method, you comprehend. Method. Arrange your facts, arrange your ideas, and if some little fact will not fit in, do not reject it, but consider it closely. Though its significance escapes you, be sure that it is significant. In the meantime, I said, considering, although we know a great deal more than we did, we are no nearer to solving the mystery of who killed Monsieur Renaud. Hey, Logie Bear. How you doing, little dude? All done with school for today? No, said Perrault cheerfully. In fact, we are a great deal further off. The fact seemed to afford him such peculiar satisfaction that I gazed at him in wonder. He met my eye and smiled. But yes, it is better so. Before, there was at all events a clear theory as to how and by whose hands he met his death. Now, that is all gone. We are in darkness. 100 conflicting points confuse and worry us. That is well. That is excellent. Out of confusion comes forth order. But if you find order to start with, if a crime seems simple and above board, eh bien, méfiez-vous. It is, how you say it, cooked. The great criminal is simple, but very few criminals are great. In trying to cover up their tracks, they invariably betray themselves. Ah, mon ami, I would that someday I could meet a really great criminal, one who commits his crime and then does nothing. Even I, Hercule Poirot, might fail to catch such a one. But I had not followed his words. A light had burst upon me. Poirot, Mrs. Renaud, I see it now. She must be shielding somebody. From the quietness with which Poirot received my remark, I could see that the idea had already occurred to him. Yes, he said thoughtfully, shielding someone, or screening someone, one of the two. I saw very little difference between the two words, but I developed my theme with a good deal of earnestness. Poirot maintained a strictly non-committal attitude, repeating, It may be, yet, yes, it may be, but as yet I do not know. There is something very deep underneath all this. You will see, something very deep. Then, as we entered our hotel, he enjoined silence on me with a gesture. Chapter 13. The Girl with the Anxious Eyes. We lunched with an excellent appetite. I understood well enough that Poirot did not wish to discuss the tragedy where we could be so easily overheard. But, as is usual when one topic fills the mind to the exclusion of everything else, no other subject of interest seemed to present itself. For a while we ate in silence, and then Poirot observed maliciously, Eh bien, and your indiscretions, you recount them not? I felt myself blushing. Oh, you mean this morning? I endeavored to adopt a tone of absolute nonchalance. Dude should be mortified and ashamed. He shouldn't be nonchalant. But I was no match for Poirot. In a very few minutes, he had extracted the whole story from me, his eyes twinkling as he did so. Tiens, a story of the most romantic. What is her name, this charming young lady? I had to confess that I did not know. Still more romantic. The first rencontre in the train from Paris. The second here. Journey's end and lovers' meetings. Is that not the saying? Don't be an ass, Poirot. Yesterday it was Mademoiselle de Brille. Today it is Mademoiselle Cinderella. Decidedly you have the heart of a Turk, Hastings. You should establish a harem. It's all very well to rag me. Mademoiselle de Brille is a very beautiful girl, and I do admire her immensely. I don't mind admitting it. The other's nothing. Don't suppose I shall ever see her again. She is quite amusing to talk to just for a railway journey, but she is not the kind of girl I should ever get keen on. I think Cinderella is one that he actually ends up with. He's going to great pains to deny her. Why? Well, it sounds snobbish perhaps, but she's not a lady, not in any sense of the word. Barreau nodded thoughtfully. There was less raillery in his voice as he asked, "You believe then in birth and breeding?" "I may be old-fashioned, but I certainly don't believe in marrying out of one's class. It never answers." "I agree with you, mon ami. 99 times out of 100 it is as you say. But there is always the 100th time. Still, that does not arise, as you do not propose to see the lady again." His last words were almost a question, and I was aware of the sharpness with which he darted a glance at me, and before my eyes, writ large in letters of fire, I saw the words, "Hotel du Phare," and I heard again her voice saying, "Come and look me up," and my own answering with empressement, "I will." Well, what of it? I had meant to go at the time, but since then I had had time to reflect. I did not like the girl. Thinking it over in cold blood, I came definitively to the conclusion that I disliked her intensely. I had got hauled over the coals for foolishly gratifying her morbid curiosity, and I had not the least wish to see her again. I answered Perrault lightly enough. "She asked me to look her up, but of course I shan't." "Why of course?" "Well, I don't want to." "I see." He studied me attentively for some minutes. "Yes, I see very well, and you are wise. Stick to what you have said." "That seems to be your invariable advice," I remarked, rather piqued. "Ah, my friend, have faith in Papa Perrault. Some day, if you permit, I will arrange you a marriage of great suitability." Perhaps to a donkey or something like that. You know, same species. "Thank you," I said, laughing, "but the prospect leaves me cold." Perrault sighed and shook his head. "Les Anglais," he murmured. "No method, absolutely none whatever. They leave all to chance." "Hey, Alex, glad you could make it. How are you, sir?" He frowned and altered the position of the salt cellar. "Mademoiselle Cinderella is staying at the Hotel d'Angleterre, you told me. Did you not?" "No, Hotel du Phare." "True, I forgot." A moment's misgiving shot across my mind. Surely I had never mentioned any hotel to Perrault. I looked across at him and felt reassured. He was cutting his bread into neat little squares, completely absorbed in his task. He must have fancied I had told him where the girl was staying. We had coffee outside, facing the sea. Perrault smoked one of his tiny cigarettes, and then drew his watch from his pocket. "The train to Paris leaves at 2:25, he observed. "I should be starting." "Paris!" I cried. "That is what I said, mon ami." "You're going to Paris? But why?" He replied very seriously. "To look for the murderer of Monsieur Renaud." "You think he is in Paris?" "I am quite certain that he is not. Nevertheless, it is there that I must look for him. You do not understand, but I will explain it all to you in good time. Believe me, this journey to Paris is necessary. I shall not be away long. In all probability, I shall return tomorrow. I do not propose that you should accompany me. Remain here and keep an eye on Gerard. Also, cultivate the society of Monsieur Renaud fils. And thirdly, if you wish, endeavor to cut him out with Mademoiselle Marthe. But I fear you will not have great success." I did not quite relish the last remark. "That reminds me," I said. "I meant to ask you how you knew about those two." "Mon ami, I know human nature. Throw together a boy, young Renaud, and a beautiful girl like Mademoiselle Marthe, and the result is almost inevitable. Then the quarrel. It was money or a woman, and remembering Lenny's description of the lad's anger, I decided on the latter. So I made my guess, and I was right. And that was why you warned me against setting my heart on the lady? You already suspected that she loved young Renaud? Perrault smiled. At any rate, I saw that she had anxious eyes. That is how I always think of Mademoiselle de Breuil, as the girl with the anxious eyes. His voice was so grave that it impressed me uncomfortably. What do you mean by that, Perrault? I fancy, my friend, that we shall see before very long. But I must start. You've oceans of time. Perhaps, but I like plenty of leisure at the station. I do not wish to rush, to hurry, to excite myself. At all events, I said, rising, I will come and see you off. You will do nothing of the sort. I forbid it. He was so peremptory that I stared at him in surprise. He nodded emphatically. I mean it, mon ami. Au revoir. You permit that I embrace you? Ah, no, I forget that it is not the English custom. Un poignée de main, alors. I felt rather at a loose end after Perrault had left me. I strolled down the beach and watched the bathers without feeling energetic enough to join them. I rather fancied that Cinderella might be disporting herself amongst them in some wonderful costume, but I saw no signs of her. So, the girl he's not interested, he wants to see in a bathing suit at the beach. Sure, checks out. Hey Meg, thanks for the lurk. I strolled aimlessly down the sand toward the further end of the town. It occurred to me that, after all, it would only be decent feeling on my part to inquire after the girl. And it would save trouble in the end. The matter would then be finished with. There would be no need for me to trouble about her any further. But if I did not go at all, she might quite possibly come and look me up at the villa, and that would be annoying in every way. Decidedly, it would be better to pay a short call, in the course of which I could make it quite clear that I could do nothing further for her in my capacity of showman. Accordingly, I left the beach and walked inland. I soon found the Hotel du Fer, a very unpretentious building. It was annoying in the extreme not to know the lady's name, and, to save my dignity, I decided to stroll inside and look around. Probably I should find her in the lounge. Merlinville was a small place. You left your hotel to go to the beach, and you left the beach to return to the hotel. There were no other attractions. There was a casino being built, but it was not yet completed. I had walked the length of the beach without seeing her. Therefore, she must be in the hotel. I went in. Several people were sitting in the tiny lounge, but my quarry was not amongst them. I looked into some other rooms, but there was no sign of her. I waited for some time, till my impatience got the better of me. I took the concierge aside and slipped 5 francs into his hand. I wish to see a lady who is staying here. A young English lady, small and dark. I'm not sure of her name. The man shook his head, seemed to be suppressing a grin. There's no such lady as you describe staying here. She is American, possibly, I suggested. These fellows are so stupid. But the man continued to shake his head. No, monsieur. There are only 6 or 7 English and American ladies altogether, and they are all much older than the lady you are seeking. It is not here that you will find her, monsieur. Hey, look at that. Fake address. He was so positive that I felt doubts. But the lady told me she was staying here. Monsieur must have made a mistake. Or it is more likely that the lady did, since there has been another gentleman here inquiring for her. What is that you say? I cried, surprised. But yes, monsieur, a gentleman who described her just as you have done. What was he like? He was a small gentleman, well-dressed, very neat, very spotless, the moustache very stiff, the head of a peculiar shape, and the eyes green. Perrault. So that was why he refused to let me accompany him to the station. The impertinence of it! I would thank him not to meddle in my concerns. Did he fancy I needed a nurse to look after me? Thanking the man, I departed. somewhat at a loss, and still much incensed with my meddlesome friend. I regretted that he was, for the moment, out of reach. I should have enjoyed telling him what I thought of his unwarranted interference. Had I not distinctly told him that I had no intention of seeing the girl? Decidedly, one's friends can be too zealous. But where was the lady? I set aside my wrath and tried to puzzle it out. Evidently, through inadvertence, she had named the wrong hotel. Then another thought struck me. Was it inadvertence? Or had she deliberately withheld her name and given me the wrong address? The more I thought about it, the more I felt convinced that this last surmise of mine was right. For some reason or other, she did not wish to let the acquaintance ripen into friendship. And though half an hour earlier this had been precisely my own view, I did not enjoy having the tables turned upon me. The whole affair was profoundly unsatisfactory, and I went up to the Villa Genevieve in a condition of distinct ill humor. I did not go to the house, but went up the path to the little bench by the shed, and sat there moodily enough. That's not dense, that's, well, that's something. Wants to be the dumper instead of the dumpy, even though then he went and tried to see her anyway. I'm certain that there are good words to describe somebody like that. I was distracted from my thoughts by the sound of voices close at hand. In a second or two I realized that they came, not from the garden I was in, but from the adjoining garden of the Villa Marguerite, and that they were approaching rapidly. A girl's voice was speaking, a voice that I recognized as that of the beautiful Martha. "Chérie," she was saying, "is it really true? Are all our troubles over?" "You know it, Martha," Jack Renaud replied. "Nothing can part us now, beloved. The last obstacle to our union is removed. Nothing can take you from me." "Nothing?" the girl murmured. "Oh, Jack, I am afraid." I had moved to depart, realizing that I was quite unintentionally eavesdropping. As I rose to my feet, I caught sight of them through a gap in the hedge. They stood together, facing me, the man's arm around the girl, his eyes looking into hers. They were a splendid-looking couple, the dark, well-knit boy, and the fair young goddess. They seemed made for each other as they stood there, happy in spite of the terrible tragedy that overshadowed their young lives. But the girl's face was troubled, and Jack Renaud seemed to recognize it, as he held her closer to him and asked, "But what are you afraid of, darling? What is there to fear, now?" And then I saw the look in her eyes, the look Perrault had spoken of, as she murmured, so that I almost guessed at the words. I am afraid for you." I did not hear young Renaud's answer. I think him thinking it was a mistake was more ego than genuine confusion about what happened. I mean, he's the great Hastings. What woman would dare not want his company? He does crazy things, great romantic intent, like proposing marriage to, a woman on the spot because he thinks she might be financially desperate. Good guy, that. I did not hear young Renaud's answer, for my attention was distracted by an unusual appearance a little further down the hedge. There appeared to be a brown bush there, which seemed odd, to say the least of it, so early in the summer. I stepped along to investigate, but at my advance, the brown bush withdrew itself precipitately and faced me with a finger to its lips. It was Giraud. Enjoining caution, he led the way round the shed until we were out of earshot. "What were you doing there?" I asked. "Exactly what you were doing, listening." "But I was not there on purpose." "Ah," said Giraud, "I was." As always, I admired the man, whilst disliking him. He looked me up and down with a sort of contemptuous disfavor. "You didn't help matters by butting in. I might have heard something useful in a minute. What have you done with your old fossil? Monsieur Perrault has gone to Paris, I replied coldly. And I can tell you, Monsieur Giraud, that he is anything but an old fossil. He has solved many cases that have completely baffled the English police. Bah! The English police, Giraud snapped his fingers disdainfully. They must be on a level with our examining magistrates. So he's gone to Paris, has he? Well, a good thing. The longer he stays there, the better. But what does he think he will find there? I thought I read in the question a tinge of uneasiness. I drew myself up. That I am not at liberty to say, I said quietly. Giraud subjected me to a piercing stare. He has probably enough sense not to tell you, he remarked rudely. Good afternoon. I'm busy. And with that, he turned on his heel and left me without ceremony. Matters seemed at a standstill at the Villa Genevieve. Giraud evidently did not desire my company, and, from what I had seen, it seemed fairly certain that Jacques Renaud did not either. I went back to the town, had an enjoyable bath, and returned to the hotel. I turned in early, wondering whether the following day would bring forth anything of interest. I was wholly unprepared for what it did bring. I was eating my petit déjeuner in the dining room when the waiter, who had been talking to someone outside, came back in obvious excitement. He hesitated for a minute, fidgeting with his napkin, and then burst out. Monsieur will pardon me, but he is connected, is he not, with the affair at the Villa Genevieve? Yes, I said eagerly. Why? Monsieur has not heard the news, though. What news? That there has been another murder there last night. What? Leaving my breakfast, I caught up my hat and ran as fast as I could. Another murder, and Perrault away? What fatality! But who had been murdered? I dashed in at the gate. A group of the servants was in the drive, talking and gesticulating. I caught hold of Francois. What has happened? Oh, monsieur, another death. It is terrible. There is a curse upon the house. But yes, I say it, a curse. They should send for Monsieur le Curé to bring some holy water. Never will I sleep another night under that roof. It might be my turn. Who knows? She crossed herself. Yes, I cried, but who has been killed? Do I know? Me? A man, a stranger. They found him up there, in the shed, not 100 yards from where they found poor monsieur. And that is not all. He is stabbed to the heart with the same dagger. Well now, looks like Hastings' mistake got somebody else killed, in addition to possibly letting the murderer get away. Chapter 14. The Second Body. Sorry, just pouring my last cup of tea. This teapot went quick. Waiting for no more, I turned and ran up the path to the shed. The two men on guard there stood aside to let me pass, and filled with excitement, I entered. The light was dim. The place was a mere rough wooden erection to keep old pots and tools in. I had entered impetuously, but on the threshold I checked myself, fascinated by the spectacle before me. Giraud was on his hands and knees, a pocket torch in his hand with which he was examining every inch of the ground. He looked up with a frown at my entrance. Then his face relaxed in a little sort of a good-humored contempt. Ah, c'est Anglais. Enter then. Let us see what you can make of this affair. Rather stung by his tone, I stooped my head and passed in. There he is, said Giraud, flashing his torch to the far corner. I stepped across. The dead man lay straight upon his back. He was of medium height, swarthy of complexion, and possibly about 50 years of age. He was neatly dressed in a dark blue suit, well cut and probably made by an expensive tailor, but not new. His face was terribly convulsed, and on his left side, just over the heart, the hilt of a dagger stood up, black and shining. I recognized it. It was the same dagger I had seen reposing in the glass jar the preceding morning. I'm expecting the doctor any minute, explained Gerard, although we hardly need him. There's no doubt what the man died of. He was stabbed to the heart, and death must have been pretty well instantaneous. When was it done? Last night? Gerard shook his head. Hardly. I don't lay down the law on medical evidence, but the man's been dead well over 12 hours. When did you say you last saw that dagger? About 10 o'clock yesterday morning. Then I should be inclined to fix the crime as not being done long after that. But people were passing and repassing this shed continually. Gerard laughed disagreeably. You progress to a marvel. Who told you he was killed in this shed? Well, I felt flustered. I assumed it. Oh, what a fine detective. Look at him, mon petit. Does a man stabbed to the heart fall like that? Neatly with his feet together and his arms to his side? No. Again, does a man lie down on his back and permit himself to be stabbed without raising a hand to defend himself? It is absurd, is it not? But see here, and here. He flashed the torch along the ground. I saw curious irregular marks in the soft dirt. He was dragged here after he was dead. Half dragged, half carried by two people. Their tracks do not show on the hard ground outside, and here they have been careful to obliterate them. But one of the two was a woman, my young friend. A woman? Yes. But if the tracks are obliterated, how do you know? Because, blurred as they are, the prints of the woman's shoe are unmistakable. Also by this. And leaning forward, he drew something from the handle of the dagger and held it up for me to see. It was a woman's long black hair, similar to the one Poirot had taken from the armchair in the library. With a slightly ironic smile, he wound it round the dagger again. We will leave things as they are as much as possible, he explained. It pleases the examining magistrate. Eh bien, do you notice anything else? I was forced to shake my head. Look at his hands. I did. The nails were broken and discolored, and the skin was hard. It hardly enlightened me as much as I should have liked it to have done. I looked up at Gerard. They are not the hands of a gentleman, he said, answering my look. On the contrary, his clothes are those of a well-to-do man. That is curious, is it not? Very curious, I agreed. And none of his clothing is marked. What do we learn from that? This man was trying to pass himself off as other than he was. He was masquerading. Why? Did he fear something? Was he trying to escape by disguising himself? As yet we do not know. But one thing we do know. He was as anxious to conceal his identity as we are to discover it. He looked down at the body again. As before, there are no fingerprints on the handle of the dagger. The murderer again wore gloves. You think, then, that the murderer was the same in both cases? I asked eagerly. Gerard became inscrutable. Never mind what I think. We shall see. Marchand. The Sergeant de Ville appeared at the doorway. Monsieur? Why is Madame Renaud not here? I sent for her a quarter of an hour ago. She is coming up the path now, monsieur, and her son with her. Good. I only want one at a time, though. Marchand saluted and disappeared again. A moment later, he reappeared with Mrs. Renaud. Here is Madame. Gerard came forward with a curt bow. This way, Madame. He led her across, and then, standing suddenly aside, Here is the man. Do you know him? And as he spoke, his eyes, gimlet-like, bored into her face, seeking to read her mind, noting every indication of her manner. But Mrs. Renaud remained perfectly calm. Too calm, I felt. She looked down at the corpse almost without interest, certainly without any sign of agitation or recognition. No, she said. I have never seen him in my life. He is quite a stranger to me. You are sure? Quite sure. You do not recognize in him one of your assailants, for instance? No. She seemed to hesitate, as though struck by the idea. No, I do not think so. Of course they wore beards. False ones, the examining magistrate thought, but still, no. Now she seemed to make up her mind definitely. I am sure neither of the two was this man. Very well, madame, that is all. She stepped out with head erect, the sun flashing on the silver threads in her hair. Jack Renaud succeeded her. He, too, failed to identify the man in a completely natural manner. Gerard merely grunted. Whether he was pleased or chagrined, I could not tell. He merely called to Marchal. You've got the other there? Yes, monsieur. Bring her in, then. The other was Madame de Brioux. She came indignantly, protesting with vehemence. I object, monsieur. This is an outrage. What have I to do with all this? Madame, said Gerard brutally, I am investigating not one murder, but 2 murders. For all I know, you may have committed them both. How dare you, she cried. How dare you insult me by such a wild accusation? It is infamous. Infamous, is it? What about this? Stooping, he again detached the hair and held it up. Do you see this, madame? He advanced towards her. You permit that I see whether it matches? With a cry, she started backwards, white to the lips. It is false. I swear it. I know nothing of the crime, of either crime. Anyone who says I do lies. Oh, mon Dieu, what shall I do? Calm yourself, madam, said Gerard coldly. No one has accused you yet. But you will do well to answer my questions without more ado. Anything you wish, monsieur. Look at the dead man. Have you ever seen him before? Drawing nearer, a little of the color creeping back to her face, Madame de Brioux looked down at the victim with a certain amount of interest and curiosity. Then she shook her head. I do not know him. It seemed impossible to doubt her. The words came so naturally. Gerard dismissed her with a nod of the head. You're letting her go? I asked in a low voice. Is that wise? Surely that black hair is from her head. I do not need teaching my business, said Gerard dryly. She is under surveillance. I have no wish to arrest her as yet. Then, frowning, he gazed down at the body. Should you say that was a Spanish type at all? He asked suddenly. I considered the face carefully. No, I said at last. I should put him down as a Frenchman, most decidedly. Gerard gave a grunt of dissatisfaction. Same here. He stood there for a moment. Then, with an imperative gesture, he waved me aside, and once more, on hands and knees, he continued his search of the floor of the shed. He was marvelous. Nothing escaped him. Inch by inch he went over the floor, turning over pots, examining old sacks. He pounced on a bundle by the door, but it proved to be only a ragged coat and trousers, and he flung it down again with a snarl. 2 pairs of old gloves interested him, but in the end he shook his head and laid them aside. Then he went back to the pots, methodically turning them over one by one. In the end, he rose to his feet and shook his head thoughtfully. He seemed baffled and perplexed. I think he had forgotten my presence. But at that moment a stir and bustle was heard outside, and our old friend, the examining magistrate, accompanied by his clerk and Monsieur Bex, with the doctor behind him, came bustling in. But this is extraordinary, Mr. Gerard, cried Monsieur Hotet. Another crime, and we have not got to the bottom of this case. There is some deep mystery here. But who is the victim this time? That is just what nobody could tell us, Monsieur le Juge. He has not been identified. Where's the body? Asked the doctor. Gerard moved aside a little. There, in the corner. He has been stabbed to the heart, as you see, and with the dagger that was stolen yesterday morning. I fancy that the murderer followed hard upon the theft, but that is for you to say. You can handle the dagger freely. There are no fingerprints on it. The doctor knelt down by the dead man, and Gerard turned to the examining magistrate. A pretty little problem, is it not? But I shall solve it. And so, no one can identify him, mused the magistrate. Could it possibly be one of the assassins? They may have had a falling out amongst themselves. Gerard shook his head. The man is a Frenchman. I would take my oath of that. But at that moment they were interrupted by the doctor, who was sitting back on his heels with a perplexed expression. You say he was killed yesterday morning? I fixed it by the theft of the dagger, explained Gerard. He may, of course, have been killed later in the day. Later in the day? Fiddlesticks! This man has been dead at least 48 hours, and probably longer. We stared at each other in blank amazement. Alright, and that's the end of the chapter. So we're going to take a short intermission, and we will read a poem before we jump back into the story. And so refill your tea, take a quick break, stand up and stretch, whatever you need to do, and we will be back in just a few minutes. Oh, are you accusing me of having some sass there, Vela? Surely not. Obviously, I wouldn't be guilty of sass. You still with us, Alex? It's still an accusation. It may perhaps be one that I'm guilty of, but it's still an accusation. Eight Ball calling me out again. Okay. Well, I picked out a poem for us here in just a minute, once we give everyone a chance to get back. Since it's the holiday season, we'll do a Christmas poem. Oh. I tell you, I am ready for this year to be over. I'm hoping that 2021 will be a better year. We can turn the corner on the dumpster fire that this year has been. All right. So, everybody back? At least those that are coming back. All right. So, promised you another poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Nope, not back. Okay. I can give you another minute. No, don't run away, Bella. That's not good. All right. So, promised you guys another poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. This one is Speaking o' Christmas. Breezes blowin' middlin' brisk, snowflakes throw the air a whisk, fallin' kinda soft and light, not enough to make things white, but just sorta siftin' down, so's to cover up the brown of the dark world's rugged ways, and make things look like holidays. Not smoothed over, but just specked, sorta strainin' for effect, and not quite a gettin' through what it started in to do. Mercy's sakes, it does seem queer. Christmas Day is most nigh here. Somehow it don't seem to me Christmas like it used to be. Christmas with its ice and snow. Christmas of the long ago. You could feel it stir and hum weeks and weeks before it come. Something in the atmosphere told you when the day was near. Didn't need no almanacs. That was one of nature's facts. Every cottage decked out gay, cedar wreaths and holly spray. And the stores, how they were dressed, tinsel tell you couldn't up the rest. Every window fixed up pat, candy canes and things like that. Noah's arks and guns and dolls, and all kinds of folderols. Then, with frosty bells a chime, sliding down the hills o' time, right amidst the fun and din, Christmas come a bustlin' in. Raised his cheery voice to call out a welcome to us all. Hale and hearty, strong and bluff, that was Christmas, sure enough. Snow deep and coastin' fine, frozen mill ponds all a-shine, seemed just to lay in wait, begging you to come and skate. And you'd get your gal and go, stumpin' cheerily through the snow, feelin' pleased and skirtin' warm, 'cause she had a holt your arm. Why, when Christmas come in, we spent the whole day glad in glee, havin' fun and feastin' high and some courtin' on the sly. Burstin' in some neighbor's door, and then suddenly, before he could give his voice a lift, yellin' at him, Christmas gift. Now such things are never heard. Merry Christmas is the word, but it's only changed name, and means given just the same. There's too many new styled ways now about the holidays. I'd just like once more to see Christmas like it used to be. Oh. I don't know. Has Christmas changed for you guys? Does it feel like it's lost something since when you were kids? And is that because the magic's gone, or just because you're seeing it with the eyes of an adult? All the tarnish that the loss of innocence brings. Anyway, Let me know what you think of the poem in the Discord. Please do join the Discord. There's a link just there above Bella's last comment and on the page. And come join. Get to know the other people in the bedtime community. Interact with me. Maybe even play some games every now and again. Oh, there are ears here. Little ears. I haven't said anything untoward. You excited for Christmas, little dude? All caps. All right. I don't know. Have you been a good lad? Listening to your parents, doing what you're supposed to, keeping up in school, helping out around the house. All right. Well, it's good to hear. Grinning all big at you, huh? I'm sure it was a totally innocent grin, too. Full of nothing but angelic goodness. All right. Well, before we get started, if you're enjoying the story and you haven't already, please click that follow button here on Twitch. Or if you're watching the recording on YouTube, go ahead and click subscribe. Really appreciate it. We'll give you updates on when new content's posted. There's also a Google Calendar link on the Twitch page that you can add to your calendar so you'll always be kept up to date on the latest streams and what we're reading and when. We got a exciting new thing coming on Thursday this week. We're going to be doing our first subscriber-only read. And we'll be doing some modern stuff with that. We're going to read some Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein, just to warm up. And then I think we're going to dive into The Hobbit and read a few chapters from that. So if you'd like to listen in, just go ahead and join the Discord and grab a subscription off the Patreon. They're cheaper than the Twitch subscriptions, so good news for you there. And go to support the stream and the costs of doing the stream, and the more support we get, the more things I can do, and the more content I can bring you all. But whatever you do to support, I am very grateful, even if that's just coming in and listening and enjoying the story. In any case, let's get back to it. We're going to do chapter 15, A Photograph. The doctor's words were so surprising that we were all momentarily taken aback. Here was a man stabbed with a dagger, which we knew to have been stolen only 24 hours previously, and yet Dr. Durand asserted positively that he had been dead at least 48 hours. The whole thing was fantastic to the last extreme. We were still recovering from the surprise of the doctor's announcement when a telegram was brought to me. It had been sent up from the hotel to the villa. I tore it open. It was from Perrault, and announced his return by the train arriving at Merlinville at 12:28. I looked at my watch, and I saw that I had just time to get comfortably to the station and meet him there. I felt that it was of the utmost importance that he should know at once of the new and startling developments in the case. Evidently, I reflected, Perrault had had no difficulty in finding what he wanted in Paris. The quickness of his return proved that. Very few hours had sufficed. I wondered how he would take the exciting news I had to impart. The train was some minutes late, and I strolled aimlessly up and down the platform. until it occurred to me that I might pass the time by asking a few questions as to who had left Merlinville by the last train on the evening of the tragedy. I approached the chief porter, an intelligent-looking man, and had little difficulty in persuading him to enter upon the subject. It was a disgrace to the police, he hotly affirmed, that such brigands of assassins should be allowed to go about unpunished. I hinted that there was some possibility that they might have left by the midnight train, but he negatived the idea decidedly. He would have noticed 2 foreigners, he was sure of it. Only about 20 people had left by the train, and he could not have failed to observe them. I do not know what put the idea into my head. Possibly it was the deep anxiety underlying Martha de Brio's tones, but I asked suddenly, "Young Monsieur Renaud, he did not leave by that train, did he?" "Ah, no, monsieur. To arrive and start off again within half an hour? It would not be amusing, that." I stared at the man, the significance of his words almost escaping me. Then I saw. "You mean," I said, my heart beating a little, "that Monsieur Jacques Renaud arrived at Merlinville that evening?" "But yes, monsieur, by the last train arriving the other way, the 11:40. My brain whirled. That, then, was the reason of Martha's poignant anxiety. Jacques Renaud had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. But why had he not said so? Why, on the contrary, had he led us to believe that he had remained in Cherbourg? Remembering his frank, boyish countenance, I could hardly bring myself to believe that he had any connection with the crime. Yet, why this silence on his part about so vital a matter? One thing was certain. Martha had known all along. Hence her anxiety and her eager questioning of Perrault to know whether anyone were suspected. My cogitations were interrupted by the arrival of the train, and in another moment I was greeting Perrault. The little man was radiant. He beamed and vociferated, and forgetting my English reluctance, embraced me warmly on the platform. "Mon cher ami, I have succeeded, but succeeded to a marvel." "Indeed, I am delighted to hear it. Have you heard the latest here?" "How would you that I should hear anything? There have been some developments, eh? The brave Gerard, he has made an arrest, or even arrests, perhaps. Ah, but I will make him look foolish, that one. But where are you taking me, my friend? Do we not go to the hotel? Is it necessary that I attend? It is necessary that I attend to my moustaches. They are deplorably limp from the heat of traveling. Also, without doubt, there is dust on my coat, and my tie. That I must rearrange." I cut short his remonstrances. "My dear Perrault, never mind all that. We must go to the villa at once. There has been another murder." I have frequently been disappointed when fancying that I was giving news of importance to my friend. Either he has known it already, or he has dismissed it as irrelevant to the main issue. And in the latter case, events have usually proved him justified. But this time, I could not complain of missing my effect. Never have I seen a man so flabbergasted. His jaw dropped. All the jauntiness went out of his bearing. He stared at me, open-mouthed. "What is that you say? Another murder? Ah, then I am all wrong. I have failed. Gerard may mock himself at me. He will have reason." "You did not expect it, then?" "I? Not the least in the world. It demolishes my theory. It ruins everything. No." He stopped dead, thumping himself on the chest. "It is impossible. I cannot be wrong. The facts, taken methodically and in the proper order, admit of only one explanation. I must be right. I am right." "But then," he interrupted me, "wait, my friend. I must be right. Therefore, this new murder is impossible unless... Oh, wait, I implore you, say no word." He was silent for a moment or two. Then, resuming his normal manner, he said in a quiet, assured voice, "The victim is a man of middle age. His body was found in the locked shed near the scene of the crime, and had been dead at least 48 hours. and it is most probable that he was stabbed in a similar manner to Monsieur Renaud, though not necessarily in the back. It was my turn to gape, and gape I did. In all my knowledge of Poirot, he had never done anything so amazing as this. And almost inevitably, a doubt crossed my mind. "Poirot," I cried, "you're pulling my leg. You've heard all about it already." He turned his earnest gaze upon me reproachfully. Would I do such a thing? I assure you I have heard nothing whatsoever. Did you not observe the shock your news was to me? But how on earth could you know all that? I was right then? But I knew it. The little gray cells, my friend, the little gray cells, they told me. Thus, and in no other way could there have been a second death. Now, tell me all. If we go round to the left here, we can take a shortcut across the golf links, which will bring us to the back of the Villa Genevieve much more quickly. As we walked, taking the way he had indicated, I recounted all I knew. Poirot listened attentively. The dagger was in the wound, you say? That is curious. You're sure it was the same one? Absolutely certain. That's what makes it so impossible. Nothing is impossible. There may have been 2 daggers. I raised my eyebrows. Surely that is in the highest degree unlikely. It would be a most extraordinary coincidence. You speak, as usual, without reflection, Hastings. In some cases, 2 identical weapons would be highly improbable. But not here. This particular weapon was a war souvenir, which was made to Jacques Renaud's orders. It is really highly unlikely, when you come to think of it, that he should have made only one. Very probably he would have another for his own use. But nobody has mentioned such a thing, I objected. A hint of the lecturer crept into Poirot's tone. My friend, in working upon a case, one does not take into account only the things that are mentioned. There is no reason to mention many things which may be important. Equally, there is often an excellent reason for not mentioning them. You can take your choice of the 2 motives. I was silent, impressed in spite of myself. Another few minutes brought us to the famous shed. We found all our friends there, and, after an interchange of polite amenities, Poirot began his task. Having watched Gerard at work, I was keenly interested. Poirot bestowed but a cursory glance on the surroundings. The only thing he examined was the ragged coat and trousers by the door. A disdainful smile rose to Gerard's lips, and as though noting it, Poirot flung the bundle down again. "Old clothes of the gardener's?" he queried. "Exactly," said Gerard. Poirot knelt down by the body. His fingers were rapid but methodical. He examined the texture of the clothes and satisfied himself that there were no marks on them. The boots he subjected to special care, also the dirty and broken fingernails. Whilst examining the latter, he threw a quick question at Gerard. "You saw these?" "Yes, I saw them," replied the other. His face remained inscrutable. Suddenly, Poirot stiffened. "Dr. Durand?" "Yes." The doctor came forward. "There is foam on the lips. You observed it?" "I didn't notice it, I must admit." "But you observe it now?" "Oh, certainly." Poirot again shot a question at Gerard. "You noticed it without doubt?" The other did not reply. Poirot proceeded. The dagger had been withdrawn from the wound. It reposed in a glass jar by the side of the body. Poirot examined it, then he studied the wound closely. When he looked up, his eyes were excited and shone with the green light I knew so well. "It is a strange wound, this. It is not bled. There is no stain on the clothes. The blade of the dagger is slightly discolored, that is all. What do you think, Monsieur le Docteur?" "I can only say that it is most abnormal." "It's not abnormal at all. It is most simple. The man was stabbed after he was dead." And stilling the clamor of voices that arose with a wave of his hand, Poirot turned to Gerard and added, "Monsieur Gerard agrees with me, do you not, monsieur?" Whatever Gerard's real belief, he accepted the position without moving a muscle. Calmly and almost scornfully he replied, "Certainly I agree." The murmur of surprise and interest broke out again. "But what an idea!" cried Monsieur Hotet. To stab a man after he is dead. Barbaric, unheard of. Some unappeasable hate, perhaps. No, monsieur le juge, said Perrault. I should fancy it was done quite cold-bloodedly, to create an impression. What impression? The impression it nearly did create, replied Perrault oracularly. Monsieur Bex had been thinking. How, then, was the man killed? He was not killed. He died. He died, monsieur le juge, if I am not much mistaken, of an epileptic fit. This statement of Perrault's again aroused considerable excitement. Dr. Durand knelt down again and made a searching examination. At last he rose to his feet. Well, monsieur le docteur? Monsieur Perrault, I am inclined to believe that you are correct in your assertion. I was misled to begin with. The incontrovertible fact that the man had been stabbed distracted my attention from any other indications. Perrault was the hero of the hour. The examining magistrate was profuse in compliments. Perrault responded gracefully, and then excused himself on the pretext that neither he nor I had yet lunched, and that he wished to repair the ravages of the journey. As we were about to leave the shed, Giraud approached us. One more thing, Monsieur Perrault, he said in his suave, mocking voice. We found this coiled round the handle of the dagger. A woman's hair. Ah, said Perrault, a woman's hair. What woman's, I wonder? I wonder also, said Giraud. Then, with a bow, he left us. He was insistent, the good Giraud, said Perrault thoughtfully, as we walked toward the hotel. I wonder in what direction he hopes to mislead me. A woman's hair. We lunched heartily, but I found Perrault somewhat distraught and inattentive. Afterwards, we went up to our sitting room, and there I begged him to tell me something of his mysterious journey to Paris. Willingly, my friend. I went to Paris to find this. He took from his pocket a small, faded newspaper cutting. It was the reproduction of a woman's photograph. He handed it to me. I uttered an exclamation. You recognize it, my friend? I nodded, although the photo obviously dated from very many years back, and the hair was dressed in a different style. The likeness was unmistakable. Madame d'Abril, I examined. Perrault shook his head with a smile. Not quite correct, my friend. She did not call herself by that name in those days. That is a picture of the notorious Madame Baroldi. Madame Baroldi? In a flash, the whole thing came back to me. The murder trial that had evoked such worldwide interest. The Baroldi case. Chapter 16. This will be interesting. So Madame d'Abril is not actually Madame d'Abril. The Baroldi case. Some 20 years or so before the opening of the present story, Monsieur Arnold Baroldi, a native of Lyons, arrived in Paris, accompanied by his pretty wife and their little daughter, a mere babe. Monsieur Baroldi was a junior partner in a firm of wine merchants, a stout, middle-aged man, fond of the good things of life, devoted to his charming wife, and altogether unremarkable in every way. The firm in which Monsieur Baroldi was a partner was a small one, and although doing well, it did not yield a large income to the junior partner. The Baroldis had a small apartment and lived in a very modest fashion to begin with. But unremarkable though Monsieur Baroldi might be, his wife was plentifully gilded with the brush of romance. Young and good-looking, and gifted withal with a singular charm of manner, Madame Baroldi at once created a stir in the quarter, especially when it began to be whispered that some interesting mystery surrounded her birth. It was rumored that she was the illegitimate daughter of a Russian Grand Duke. Others asserted that it was an Austrian Archduke, and that the union was legal, though morganatic. But all stories agreed upon one point, that Jean Baroldi was the center of an interesting mystery. Questioned by the curious, Madame Baroldi did not deny these rumors. On the other hand, she let it be clearly understood that Though her lips were sealed, all these stories had a foundation in fact. To intimate friends, she unburdened herself further, spoke of political intrigues, of papers, of obscure dangers that threatened her. There was also much talk of crown jewels that were to be sold secretly, with herself acting as the go-between. Amongst the friends and acquaintances of the Baroldis was a young lawyer, Georges Canu. It was soon evident that the fascinating Jean had completely enslaved his heart. Madame Baroldi encouraged the young man in a discreet fashion, but being always careful to affirm her complete devotion to her middle-aged husband. Nevertheless, many spiteful persons did not hesitate to declare that young Canu was her lover, and not the only one. When the Baroldis had been in Paris about 3 months, another personage came upon the scene. This was Mr. Hiram P. Trapp, a native of the United States and extremely wealthy. Introduced to the charming and mysterious Madame Baroldi, he fell a prompt victim to her fascinations. His admiration was obvious, though strictly respectful. About this time, Madame Baroldi became more outspoken in her confidences. To several friends, she declared herself greatly worried on her husband's behalf. She explained that he had been drawn into several schemes of a political nature, and also referred to some important papers that had been entrusted to him for safekeeping, and which concerned a secret of far-reaching European importance. They had been entrusted to his custody to throw pursuers off the track. Madame Baroldi was nervous, having recognized several important members of the revolutionary circle in Paris. On the 28th day of November, the blow fell. The woman who came daily to clean and cook for the Baroldis was surprised to find the door of the apartment standing wide open. Hearing faint moans issuing from the bedroom, she went in. A terrible sight met her eyes. Madame Baroldi lay on the floor, bound hand and foot, uttering feeble moans, having managed to free her mouth from a gag. On the bed was Monsieur Baroldi, lying in a pool of blood, with a knife driven through his heart. Madame Baroldi's story was clear enough. Suddenly awakened from sleep, she had discerned 2 masked men bending over her. Stifling her cries, they had bound and gagged her. They had then demanded of Monsieur Baroldi the famous secret. But the intrepid wine merchant refused point-blank to accede to their request. Angered by his refusal, one of the men incontinently stabbed him through the heart. With the dead man's keys, they had opened the safe in the corner and had carried away with them a mass of papers. Both men were heavily bearded and had worn masks, but Madame Baroldi declared positively that they were Russians. The affair created an immense sensation. It was referred to variously as the Nihilist atrocity, revolutionaries in Paris, and the Russian mystery. Time went on, and the mysterious bearded men were never traced. And then, just as public interest was beginning to die down, a startling development occurred. Madame Baroldi was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. The trial, when it came on, aroused widespread interest. The youth and beauty of the accused and her mysterious history were sufficient to make it of it a cause célèbre. People ranged themselves wildly for or against the prisoner, but her partisans received several severe checks to their enthusiasm. The romantic past of Madame Baroldi, her royal blood, and the mysterious intrigues in which she had her being were shown to be mere fantasies of the imagination. It was proved beyond doubt that Jean Baroldi's parents were a highly respectable and prosaic couple, fruit merchants who lived on the outskirts of Lyons. The Russian Grand Duke, the court intrigues, and the political schemes, all the stories current, were traced back to the lady herself. From her brain had emanated these ingenious myths, and she was proved to have raised a considerable sum of money from various credulous persons by her fiction of the crown jewels, the jewels in question being found to be mere paste imitations. Remorselessly, the whole story of her life was laid bare. The motive for the murder was found in Mr. Hiram P. Trapp. Mr. Trapp did his best, but relentlessly and agilely cross-questioned, he was forced to admit that he loved the lady, and that, had she been free, he would have asked her to be his wife. The fact that the relations between them were admittedly platonic strengthened the case against the accused. Debarred from becoming his mistress by the simple, honorable nature of the man, Jean Baroldi had conceived the monstrous project of ridding herself of her elderly, undistinguished husband and becoming the wife of the rich American. Throughout, Madame Baroldi confronted her accusers with complete sang-froid and self-possession. Her story never varied. She continued to declare strenuously that she was of royal birth, and that she had been substituted for the daughter of the fruit seller at an early age. Absurd and completely unsubstantiated as these statements were, a great number of people believed implicitly in their truth. But the prosecution was implacable. It denounced the masked Russians as a myth, and asserted that the crime had been committed by Madame Baroldi and her lover, Georges Canu. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the latter, but he had wisely disappeared. Evidence showed that the bonds which secured Madame Baroldi were so loose that she could easily have freed herself. And then, toward the close of the trial, a letter, posted in Paris, was sent to the public prosecutor. It was from Georges Canu, and without revealing his whereabouts, it contained a full confession of the crime. He declared that he had indeed struck the fatal blow at Madame Baroldi's instigation. The crime had been planned between them. Believing that her husband ill-treated her and maddened by his own passion for her, a passion which he believed her to return, he had planned the crime and struck the fatal blow that should free the woman he loved from a hateful bondage. Now, for the first time, he learned of Mr. Hiram P. Trapp, and realized that the woman he loved had betrayed him. Not for his sake did she wish to be free, but in order to marry the wealthy American. She had used him as a cat's paw, and now, in his jealous rage, he turned and denounced her, declaring that throughout he had acted at her instigation. And then, Madame Baroldi proved herself the remarkable woman she undoubtedly was. Without hesitation, she dropped her previous defense and admitted that the Russians were a pure invention on her part. The real murderer was Georges Canu. Maddened by passion, he had committed the crime, vowing that if she did not keep silence, he would enact a terrible vengeance from her. Terrified by his threats, she had consented, also fearing it likely that if she told the truth, she might be accused of conniving at the crime. But she had steadfastly refused to have anything more to do with her husband's murderer, and it was in revenge for this attitude on her part that he had written this letter accusing her. She swore solemnly that she had had nothing to do with the planning of the crime, that she had awoke on that memorable night to find Georges Canu standing over her, the blood-stained knife in his hand. It was a touch-and-go affair. Madame Baroldi's story was hardly credible, but this woman, whose fairy tales of royal intrigues had been so easily accepted, had the supreme art of making herself believed. Her address to the jury was a masterpiece. The tears streaming down her face, she spoke of her child, of her woman's honor, of her desire to keep her reputation untarnished for the child's sake. She admitted that Georges Canu, having been her lover, she might perhaps be held morally responsible for the crime, but before God, nothing more. She knew that she had committed a grave fault in not denouncing Canu to the law, but she declared in a broken voice that that was a thing no woman could have done. She had loved him. Could she let her hand be the one to send him to the guillotine? She had been guilty of much, but she was innocent of the terrible crime imputed to her. However that may have been, her eloquence and personality won the day. Madame Baroldi, amidst a scene of unparalleled excitement, was acquitted. Despite the utmost endeavors of the police, Georges Canu was never traced. As for Madame Baroldi, nothing more was heard of her. Taking the child with her, she left Paris to begin a new life. Any chance Monsieur Renaud was Georges Canu, do you think? As I recall, he had a mysterious origin at some point. that there was no record of him in his early days. Chapter 17. We make further investigations. I have set down the Baroldi case in full. Of course, all the details did not present themselves to my memory as I have recounted them here. Nevertheless, I recalled the case fairly accurately. It had attracted a great deal of interest at the time, and had been fully reported by the English papers, so that it did not need much effort of memory on my part to recall the salient details. Just for the moment, in my excitement, it seemed to clear up the whole matter. I admit that I am impulsive, and Perrault deplores my custom of jumping to conclusions, but I think I had some excuse in this instance. The remarkable way in which this discovery justified Perrault's point of view struck me at once. "Perrault," I said, "I congratulate you. I see everything now." "If that is indeed the truth, then I congratulate you, mon ami. For as a rule, you are not famous for seeing. Eh? Is it not so?" That's definitely a fair comment. I felt a little annoyed. "Come now, don't rub it in. You've been so confoundedly mysterious all along, with your hints and your insignificant details that anyone might fail to see what you were driving at." Perrault lit one of his little cigarettes with his usual precision. Then he looked up. "And since you see everything now, mon ami, what exactly is it that you see?" "Why, that it was Madame de Baroldi, who murdered Monsieur Renaud. The similarity of the two cases proves that beyond a doubt." "Then you consider that Madame Baroldi was wrongly acquitted, that in actual fact she was guilty of connivance in her husband's murder?" I opened my eyes wide. "But of course, don't you?" Perrault walked to the end of the room, absent-mindedly straightened a chair, and then said thoughtfully, "Yes, that is my opinion, but there is no of course about it. Technically speaking, Madame Baroldi is innocent." "Of that crime, perhaps, but not of this." Perrault sat down again, and regarded me, his thoughtful air more marked than ever. "So, it is definitely your opinion, Hastings, that Madame de Breuil murdered Monsieur Renaud?" "Yes." "Why?" He shot the question at me with such suddenness that I was taken aback. "Why?" I stammered. "Why? Oh, because—" I came to a stop. Perrault nodded his head at me. "You see, you come to a stumbling block at once. Why should Madame de Breuil, I shall call her that for clearness' sake, murder Monsieur Renaud? We can find no shadow of a motive. She does not benefit by his death. Considered as either mistress or blackmailer, she stands to lose. You cannot have a murder without a motive. The first crime was different. There, we had a rich lover waiting to step into her husband's shoes." "Money is not the only motive for murder," I objected. "True," agreed Perrault placidly. "There are two others. The crime passionnel is one, and there is the third, rare motive, murder for an idea, which implies some form of mental derangement on the part of the murderer. Homicidal mania and religious fanaticism belong to that class. We can rule it out here." "But what about the crime passionnel? Can you rule that out? If Madame de Breuil was Renaud's mistress, if she found that his affection was cooling, or if her jealousy was aroused in any way, might she not have struck him down in a moment of anger?" Perrault shook his head. I say if, you note, Madame de Breuil was Renaud's mistress. He had not time to tire of her. And in any case, you mistake her character. She is a woman who can simulate great emotional stress. She is a magnificent actress. But, looked at dispassionately, her life disproves her appearance. Throughout, if we examine it, she had been cold-blooded and calculating in her motives and actions. It was not to link her life with that of her young lover that she connived at her husband's murder. The rich American, for whom she probably did not care a button, was her objective. If she committed a crime, she would always do so for gain. Here, there was no gain. Besides, how do you account for the digging of the grave? That was a man's work. She might have had an accomplice, I suggested, unwilling to relinquish my belief. I passed to another objection. You have spoken of the similarity between the two crimes. Wherein does that lie, my friend? I stared at him in astonishment. Why, Perrault, it was you who remarked on that story. The story of the masked men, the secret, the papers. Perrault smiled a little. Do not be so indignant, I beg of you. I repudiate nothing. The similarity of the two stories links the two cases together inevitably. But reflect now on something very curious. It is not Madame de Breuil who tells us this tale. If it were, all would indeed be plain sailing. It is Madame Renaud. Is she, then, in league with the other? I can't believe that, I said slowly. If it is so, she must be the most consummate actress the world has ever known. Ta, 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 said Perrault impatiently. Again, you have the sentiment and not the logic. If it is necessary for a criminal to be a consummate actress, then by all means assume her to be one. But is it necessary? I do not believe Madame Renaud to be in league with Madame de Breuil for several reasons, some of which I have already enumerated to you. The others are self-evident. Therefore, that possibility eliminated, we draw very near to the truth, which is, as always, very curious and interesting. Perrault, I cried, what more do you know? Mon ami, you must make your own deductions. You have access to all the facts. Concentrate your gray cells. Reason, not like Gerard, but like Hercule Poirot. But are you sure? My friend, in many ways I have been an imbecile, but at last I see clearly. You know everything? I have discovered what Monsieur Renaud sent for me to discover. And you know the murderer? I know one murderer. What do you mean? We talk a little at cross purposes. There are here not one crime, but two. The first I have solved. The second, eh bien, I will confess, I am not sure. But Perrault, I thought you said the man in the shed had died a natural death. Ta-ta-ta, Perrault made his favorite ejaculation of impatience. Still you do not understand. One may have a crime without a murderer, but for two crimes it is essential to have two bodies. His remark struck me as so peculiarly lacking in lucidity that I looked at him in some anxiety, but he appeared perfectly normal. Suddenly, he rose and strolled to the window. Here he is, he observed. Who? Monsieur Jacques Renaud. I sent a note up to the villa to ask him to come here. That changed the course of my ideas, and I asked Perrault if he knew that Jacques Renaud had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. I had hoped to catch my astute little friend napping, but as usual, he was omniscient. He, too, had inquired at the station. And without doubt we are not original in the idea, Hastings. The excellent Gerard, he has also probably made his inquiries. You don't think, I said, and then stopped. Ah, no, it would be too horrible. Perrault looked inquiringly at me, but I said no more. It had just occurred to me that though there were 7 women directly or indirectly connected with the case, Mrs. Renaud and Madame de Breuil and her daughter, the mysterious visitor, and the 3 servants, there was, with the exception of old Augusta, who could hardly count, only one man, Jacques Renaud, and a man must have dug a grave. I had no time to further develop the appalling idea that had occurred to me, for Jacques Renaud was ushered into the room. Perrault greeted him in a businesslike manner. Take a seat, monsieur. I regret infinitely to derange you, but you will perhaps understand that the atmosphere of the villa is not too congenial to me. Monsieur Gerard and I do not see eye to eye about everything. His politeness to me has not been striking, and you will comprehend that I do not intend any little discoveries I may make to benefit him in any way. Exactly, Monsieur Perrault, said the lad. That fellow Gerard is an ill-conditioned brute, and I'd be delighted to see someone score at his expense. Then I may ask a little favor of you? Certainly. I will ask you to go to the railway station and take a train to the next station along the line, Abilac. Ask there at the cloakroom whether two foreigners deposited a valise there on the night of the murder. It is a small station, and they are almost certain to remember. Will you do this? Of course I will, said the boy, mystified, though ready for the task. I and my friend, you comprehend, have business elsewhere, explained Perrault. There is a train in a quarter of an hour, and I will ask you not to return to the villa, as I have no wish for Gerard to get an inkling of your errand. Very well. I will go straight to the station. He rose to his feet. Perrault's voice stopped him. One moment, Monsieur Renaud. There is one little matter that puzzles me. Why did you not mention to Monsieur Hotet this morning that you were in Merlinville on the night of the crime? Jacques Renaud's face went crimson. With an effort he controlled himself. You have made a mistake. I was in Cherbourg, as I told the examining magistrate this morning. Perrault looked at him. His eyes narrowed, cat-like, until they only showed a gleam of green. Then it is a singular mistake that I have made, for it is shared by the station staff. They say you arrived by the 11:40 train. For a moment, Jacques Renaud hesitated. Then he made up his mind. And if I did, I suppose you do not mean to accuse me of participating in my father's murder? He asked the question haughtily, his head thrown back. I should like an explanation of the reason that brought you here. That is simple enough. I came to see my fiancée, Mademoiselle de Breuil. I was on the eve of a long voyage, uncertain as to when I should return. I wished to see her before I went, to assure her of my unchanging devotion. And you did see her? Perrault's eyes never left the other's face. There was an appreciable pause before Renaud replied. Then he said, Yes. And afterwards? I found I had missed the last train. I walked to St. Beuveau, where I knocked up a garage and got a car to take me back to Cherbourg. St. Beuveau? That's 15 kilometers. A long walk, Monsieur Renaud. I felt like walking. Perrault bowed his head, and as a sign that he accepted the explanation. Jacques Renaud took up his hat and cane and departed. In a trice, Perrault jumped to his feet. Quick, Hastings, we will go after him. Keeping a discreet distance behind our quarry, we followed him through the streets of Merlinville. But when Perrault saw that he took the turning to the station, he checked himself. All is well. He has taken the bait. He will go to Abilac and will inquire for the mythical valise left by the mythical foreigners. Yes, mon ami, all that was a little invention of my own. You wanted him out of the way, I exclaimed. Your penetration is amazing, Hastings. Now, if you please, we will go up to the Villa Genevieve. We will end there for today, because it's the end of the chapter. Oh, I mean, it's certainly possible that women could dig graves, but perhaps no woman involved in the case could dig a grave. I mean, we are dealing with a bunch of refined aristocratic ladies, right? And older ladies as well. It's possible they couldn't quite manage it. What I'm wondering, though, is the idea of who might have dug the grave kind of a red herring of sorts, because it was on a golf course near a green. Is there any reason that the people building the golf course couldn't have dug it out as a sand trap, and the murderer just took advantage of it, and that's why the body wasn't actually buried? Not to mention, are there some financial interests with the golf course? Because originally they said that the boundaries of the course hadn't actually been fixed yet, And so perhaps Monsieur Renault wouldn't sign over land to the golf course that they wanted for development. And so, as a message to the family, he was eliminated in order to ensure that they would sell the property to them. I mean, it doesn't even have to have been a finished sand trap, and we don't really have dimensions on the grave, so to speak. Just that it was a shallow pit that the body was found in. So, just speculation and questions that I have. I have not read this. I do not know the identity of the murderer or how the story is going to evolve. So, these are just things that I'm thinking about. I'd love to chat more with you guys about it in the Discord. So, please, if you're following along with the story, jump in there and chat about it into the Stream Reads channel. Let me know what you think. And it looks like Lady Luna Star is streaming again, so maybe we'll go raid her again. She had some cool like Japanese flute music. That work for you guys? And away we go.